Welcome to Starlight Sci-Fi, where stories from the stars inspire the mind and ignite the imagination. If you love thrilling, heartfelt science fiction tales, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more stories that explore the infinite possibilities of the universe. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a silver-skinned alien emerges from the shadows of Earth's mountains, carrying a child with glowing eyes. She has crossed the stars, her journey fueled by a single, unshakable purpose: to find the human who saved her world from extinction. Decades have passed since his message first reached her dying planet, but now she returns, determined to honor the one who taught her people the meaning of hope. But as she begins her search, she wonders, will he still be here? And does he even know the lives he changed forever? It began on a quiet autumn evening, when the stars above seemed unusually bright. Amidst the soft hum of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves, a faint but persistent signal pierced through the static of the cosmos. The message originated from a distant star system over 30 light-years away, its origin veiled in mystery. Astronomers monitoring deep space frequencies scrambled to make sense of the transmission, which was faint yet undeniably deliberate. It wasn't a natural anomaly. Someone or something was calling out. The signal repeated at precise intervals, forming a sequence that matched Earth's most fundamental mathematical constants: pi, the Fibonacci sequence, and prime numbers. These were universal markers of intelligence, impossible to occur by chance in such a structured manner. Initial excitement quickly turned into awe when scientists realized the signal wasn't just a general broadcast, it was directed. The coordinates embedded within the message pointed to a very specific location on Earth, an abandoned observatory tucked into the rugged hills of Wyoming. This observatory had been inactive for nearly 2 decades, its equipment now relics of a bygone era of stargazing. Once a hub of astronomical discovery, it had fallen into disuse after its caretaker, Dr. Alan Reeves, vanished mysteriously. Dr. Reeves was a once renowned astronomer who had sparked fleeting international attention nearly 30 years earlier when he claimed to have intercepted a message from Intergalactic. At the time, his findings had been dismissed as interference from a weather satellite. The scientific community had ridiculed him, forcing him into isolation. Shortly after, he disappeared entirely, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and air of unresolved intrigue. Now, years later, the universe seemed to be calling back to the very place where Reeves had made his controversial discovery. Those who had dismissed his claims began to wonder if there had been more truth to his words than they had cared to admit. The timing of this new signal was uncanny, almost as if it had been waiting for humanity to be ready. When news of the signal broke, it sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. Debate erupted over its purpose. Was it a greeting? A warning? Or something else entirely? But the deeper question that gnawed at everyone's mind was, why now? Why here? The location made no sense. There were newer, more advanced observatories across the globe. Why focus on an outdated, decaying facility linked to a disgraced astronomer? As the world watched with bated breath, attempts to decode the message intensified. Yet the signal refused to yield its secrets. All that was clear was its destination, Earth. And, somehow, Alan Reeves. But Reeves had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a puzzle that only deepened the mystery. Late one night, just as doubts began to rise, the signal abruptly stopped. In its silence, the universe seemed to hold its breath. And then, just days later, something happened that no one could have anticipated. A ship, vast and shimmering, entered Earth's atmosphere. It descended silently toward the abandoned observatory, carrying with it an otherworldly presence and a story no one was prepared to hear. It happened without warning. A clear, moonlit night blanketed the small Wyoming town near the abandoned observatory, casting its hills and valleys in silver hues. Residents were accustomed to quiet evenings, the kind where time seemed to stretch endlessly, interrupted only by the occasional howl of a distant coyote. But this night, tranquility gave way to something extraordinary. The first sign was a low hum, soft and rhythmic, like a melody too faint to fully grasp. It began as a vibration in the air, felt more than heard. The hum intensified, resonating deep within the bones of those who stopped to listen. Then a flash of light erupted across the horizon, streaking the sky with colors that defied earthly description, an aurora of brilliance that painted the heavens in shimmering ribbons of gold, violet, and emerald. At the heart of this celestial spectacle was an object descending from the stars. Unlike the fiery streaks of meteors, this was controlled, deliberate. It slowed as it neared the earth, its massive form becoming visible against the star-speckled canvas. The ship was unlike anything humanity had ever imagined, an immense, oblong structure with a surface that seemed alive. Its hull rippled like liquid metal, reflecting and refracting light in patterns that shifted with every movement. The ship emitted no sound as it approached, its descent eerily silent, as if it were respectful of the planet it was about to touch. The ship came to rest in the field surrounding the abandoned observatory. It hovered for a moment, barely a meter above the ground, before lowering itself gently. Grass bent beneath its weight, but the earth beneath it remained undisturbed, as if the ship refused to harm even the soil. The hum faded, replaced by a profound, almost sacred silence. From a central seam in the ship's smooth exterior, a hatch slowly opened. A ramp extended, its edges glowing faintly. The tension in the air was palpable. Across the town, those brave enough to venture outside watched with wide eyes and pounding hearts. But no one dared approach. Cherie. And then she appeared. The figure that emerged from the ship was tall, standing nearly 2 meters, her presence commanding yet serene. Her skin glimmered like molten silver, shifting subtly as if alive. Her eyes, an otherworldly shade of blue, glowed softly, exuding both intelligence and an indescribable warmth. Her movements were fluid, almost as though she were gliding rather than walking. In her arms, she cradled a child. The child was small, humanoid, yet distinctly alien. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with faint veins of light pulsing beneath the surface. Its eyes mirrored the alien's, glowing with that same ethereal blue. The child gazed around with a quiet curiosity, seemingly unafraid. The alien surveyed the observatory and the surrounding area with purpose, her expression unreadable. She moved to a patch of soft soil and knelt, carefully setting the child beside her. With a single graceful motion, she extended a finger and began to write in the dirt. The word she left behind was simple, yet it carried profound significance. It read, Alan Reeves. No one who witnessed her arrival could understand her purpose. But one thing was clear: she had come to Earth for a reason, and she wasn't leaving without it. The name Alan Reeves sent ripples through the scientific community. Though it had been years since anyone had spoken his name, it was one that carried weight in the annals of astronomical history, though not for reasons Alan would have wanted. Decades earlier, his life had been consumed by a single, extraordinary discovery. It was a faint signal from space, barely distinguishable from the noise of the cosmos. But Alan had detected something in it that no one else had: a pattern, a message. At the time, Alan worked tirelessly to prove that the signal was real, not some random interference or mundane celestial event. His research led him to a startling conclusion: the signal was a cry for help. Though weak and fragmented, it carried elements that suggested a plea, a desperate call from a distant civilization on the brink of collapse. Alan was convinced of its authenticity. He began transmitting responses, sending out basic instructions in hopes that the beings on the other side could understand. He shared knowledge that humanity had taken centuries to perfect: methods for purifying water, cultivating crops in hostile conditions, and shielding against radiation. His work consumed him, driven not by fame but by a deep-seated belief that if the roles were reversed, humanity would hope for the same compassion from the stars. But the scientific community wasn't kind. His peers mocked his claims, labeling him a dreamer and a fool. The media turned him into a punchline, portraying him as a man chasing fantasies. Funding for his observatory dried up, and the world moved on. To everyone else, the signal was a glitch, a coincidence. But Alan never stopped. For months he continued sending messages, clinging to the hope that someone was listening. He often worked alone in the quiet confines of his observatory, surrounded by notebooks filled with star charts and calculations. His obsession drove away friends and family. Then, one day, the signal stopped. It vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Alan to wonder if his efforts had made any difference. Had his transmissions reached their intended recipients? Had he been too late? The silence was deafening, and with it came the crushing weight of doubt. In the years that followed, Alan disappeared from public life. Some said he had retreated into isolation, unable to bear the humiliation. Others speculated that he had left the observatory in search of a fresh start. The truth was never confirmed. By the time the observatory was shut down and abandoned, Alan Reeves had become little more than a footnote in the history of astronomy. But the alien's arrival changed everything. Her presence was proof that Alan's work had mattered, that his cries into the void had been answered. She was a survivor, a living testament to the impact of his compassion. The knowledge Alan had sent all those years ago had saved her people, enabling them to rise from the ashes of their dying world. And now she had come to find him, to thank him, to show him that his work had not been in vain. But Alan Reeves was nowhere to be found. With every passing moment, the mystery deepened. Where was he? Did he even know the magnitude of what he had accomplished? These questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as the alien continued her search. She wasn't just looking for the man who had saved her civilization, she was seeking the human who had reminded her species what it meant to hope. Her name was Liara, and she had been young, barely an adult by the standards of her species, when the signal from Earth had reached her dying world. It had been the faintest whisper, almost lost amidst the cacophony of radiation storms and the fractured remnants of her planet's communications network. At first it seemed too good to be true. Could another civilization, one impossibly far away, truly have heard their desperate cries? Her planet, Action, had been in its twilight. Decades of environmental collapse and unchecked warfare had left it on the brink of annihilation. The surface was scorched and uninhabitable, its atmosphere laced with deadly radiation. The remnants of her people had retreated into underground shelters, but their supplies were dwindling, and even their advanced technology could not hold back the inevitable. When the Earth signal was decoded, the instructions it carried were deceptively simple methods for purifying water, shielding against radiation, and growing food in barren soil. These were concepts that her people, for all their advancements, had long dismissed in favor of artificial solutions that no longer functioned. Liara had been skeptical at first. How could such primitive ideas from a world so distant possibly save them? But desperation often breeds clarity. The ideas were tested, implemented, and refined. Slowly, miraculously, they began to work. The water became drinkable again. The underground farms yielded crops for the first time in decades. Protective domes were reinforced using materials inspired by Earth's ancient practices. Liara had been among the scientists who implemented the solutions, and she had watched as her people took their first steps toward recovery. The signal's impact was undeniable. It wasn't just knowledge that had been shared, but hope. It was proof that they were not alone, that someone out there cared enough to listen and act. When the rebuilding began, Liara made a vow. She would find the being who had sent those transmissions. It didn't matter how far away they were or how long it would take. She would cross the galaxy if she had to. The name Alan Reeves, embedded in the final messages, was etched into her mind. He wasn't just a distant figure to her, he was a symbol of salvation, a bridge between their species. The journey was long and perilous. Action had few resources to spare, but they crafted a vessel for her, a ship capable of traveling through wormholes and enduring the harsh realities of interstellar space. Her voyage spanned decades. She navigated collapsing wormhole routes, hostile regions of uncharted space, and moments of solitude so profound that they threatened to break her resolve. It was during one of these long, lonely stretches that she found Solon. The child had been adrift in the wreckage of a derelict ship, barely alive. They were not of her species, nor of any she recognized, but Liara saw in them the same spark of life, and potential that Alan had seen in her people. She rescued the child and raised them as her own, teaching them the values Alan's signal had inspired: compassion, resilience, and the belief that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple across the universe. The journey to Earth became their shared purpose. Solon grew up learning the story of Alan Reeves and the distant blue planet that had changed the fate of action. Liara's determination never wavered, even as years turned into decades. Her ship, powered by technology her people had salvaged and reimagined, carried them ever closer to their destination. When Earth finally came into view, Liara felt a surge of emotions she couldn't name. Relief, anticipation, and perhaps a hint of fear. Would Alan Reeves still be alive? Would he even remember what he had done for her people? She didn't know. But as her ship descended through Earth's atmosphere and settled near the coordinates she had carried in her mind for so long, one thing was certain: she had come not just to repay a debt, but to honor the human who had taught her people to believe in something greater than themselves. And even if Alan Reeves was no longer there, his legacy would endure, written in the lives he had saved and in the stars she had crossed to find him. The observatory stood like a forgotten sentinel, its crumbling walls bearing witness to decades of neglect. Rusted metal and shattered glass reflected the pale morning light, and vines snaked their way through cracks in the foundation. To Liara, it was more than just a building, it was the final thread connecting her to the man who had altered the course of her civilization. As she stepped toward the entrance, Solon followed closely, their glowing eyes wide with curiosity. The child, though young, was attuned to the significance of the moment. For years, Liara had shared stories of this place, painting vivid pictures of the human who had reached across the void to offer salvation. Now, as they stood on the threshold, the enormity of the journey settled over them both. Inside, the observatory was a time capsule. Dust coated every surface, and faded star charts clung to the walls, their edges curled and brittle. Broken equipment was scattered across the floor, and shelves once filled with books and notes now sat barren. Despite its decay, there was a palpable energy in the air, as if the building itself remembered the man who had worked tirelessly within its walls. Liara scanned the room, her sharp gaze catching every detail. The coordinates had brought her here, but Alan Reeves was nowhere to be found. Fragments of his life remained, though personal items left behind in his haste to disappear. A weathered notebook lay on a desk, its pages filled with intricate calculations and hastily scribbled thoughts. Liara gently picked it up, careful not to disturb the fragile paper. The notes spoke of urgency, of a man racing against time to make contact with an alien species he might never see. There were diagrams of Action's star system, rough sketches of what he imagined their world might look like. On the final page, a single line stood out, written in bold, determined strokes: "If they are to survive, they must know we care." The words resonated deeply with Liara. They were proof of Alan's unwavering belief in the power of compassion, but they also raised more questions. Why had he left this place? And where had he gone? The answer came unexpectedly. Among the scattered debris, Liara discovered a faded photograph tucked beneath a broken console. It showed a younger Alan standing in front of the observatory, smiling warmly. Beside him was a plaque with the name of a nearby town engraved on it. It wasn't much, but it was a clue, a direction to follow. With the photograph in hand, Liara and Solon left the observatory and began their journey into the town. As they walked, the world around them came alive with sounds and sights unlike anything they had ever known. Birds chirped from the treetops, and the air was rich with the scent of pine. Solon marveled at the vibrant colors, their awe evident in their glowing eyes. The town itself was modest, a collection of quaint houses and small shops nestled in a valley. The residents, though initially wary of the towering, silver-skinned alien and her glowing child, quickly recognized that Liara meant no harm. Her graceful movements and calm demeanor conveyed a quiet strength, and though she did not speak, her actions spoke volumes. Liara showed the photograph to anyone who would look, pointing to Alan's face and the name of the observatory. Many shook their heads, their expressions filled with uncertainty. Alan Reeves had left the public eye so long ago that he had become more of a myth than a man. Some remembered his name, but none could say where he had gone. Finally, an elderly shopkeeper offered a lead. Alan had been seen years ago, living in a cabin deep in the mountains, far from the noise and judgment of society. It was a remote place, difficult to reach, but Liara's resolve was unshaken. She thanked the shopkeeper with a graceful nod, her luminous eyes briefly meeting his. As she and Solon set out toward the mountains, a sense of determination filled the air. Liara was no longer just searching for Alan Reeves, she was piecing together the story of a man who had defied the odds to save her people. Every step brought her closer to the truth, and with it, the hope that she could finally express the gratitude her civilization owed to the one human who had answered their call. The mountains loomed ahead, their jagged peaks shrouded in mist. The journey would not be easy, but Liara and Solon pressed on, guided by the faint glimmer of hope that Alan Reeves was still out there, waiting to be found. The climb into the mountains was grueling. The air grew thinner with every step, and the dense forest gave way to rocky trails that tested even Lyra's endurance. Despite her advanced physiology, the terrain was unlike anything she had encountered before. Solon, though smaller and less experienced, displayed remarkable resilience, their glowing eyes scanning the landscape with a mix of curiosity and determination. The child's quiet strength reminded Liara of the lessons she had taught them, lessons rooted in the wisdom of Alan Reeves. The higher they climbed, the more the world below seemed to disappear, replaced by a vast expanse of sky and clouds. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting the peaks in hues of orange and gold. The air carried a crisp chill, and the only sounds were the crunch of their footsteps on gravel and the distant cry of a hawk. Hours passed before they saw a modest cabin nestled in a clearing, partially obscured by a thicket of pines. It was unassuming, built of weathered wood with a slanted roof and a small porch. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a sign of life within. Liara paused, her chest tightening with anticipation. This was it. After years of searching, she was finally within reach of the man whose signal had changed everything. She approached the cabin slowly, her movements deliberate. Solon clung to her side, their small hand clutching the edge of her garment. Together they reached the front door, which bore the marks of time-faded paint, scratches, and a faint creak as the wind pushed against it. Liara raised a hand and hesitated. Would he even remember? Would he welcome her, or would he recoil in fear? Steeling herself, she pressed her palm gently against the door, feeling its rough texture beneath her fingers. She pushed it open, and the warmth of the cabin enveloped her. The interior was simple but inviting, a single room with a stone fireplace, shelves lined with books and jars, and a wooden table cluttered with papers and tools. And there he was. Alan Reeves sat in a chair by the fire, his once dark hair now streaked with silver and his face etched with the lines of time. He looked up, startled at first, but his expression quickly softened. Though he was older than the man in the photograph, his eyes held the same warmth and intelligence that Liara had imagined countless times. The room fell silent as they regarded one another. Liara stepped forward, her movements graceful and purposeful. She knelt before him, lowering herself to his level, and placed the photograph she had carried on the table. Solon stood beside her, their glowing eyes wide with awe. Alan's gaze shifted from the photograph to Liara and the child. His face, a mixture of wonder and disbelief, told her that he understood. He didn't need words to recognize the significance of their presence. The years of doubt, of wondering if his messages had made a difference, dissolved in an instant. Liara extended her hands, holding them palms up in a gesture of offering. She didn't speak, but her actions conveyed everything: gratitude, respect, and the profound acknowledgement of what he had done. Alan's hands trembled as he reached out to hers, bridging the gap between two worlds that had once seemed impossibly distant. For Liara, this was the culmination of her journey. For Alan, it was the validation of a lifetime's work. And for Solon, It was a moment that would define their understanding of what it meant to be connected across the vastness of space and time. As the fire crackled softly in the hearth, the three of them sat together, the weight of the moment shared in silence. The alien and the human, separated by light years but united by hope, had finally found each other. And though their story was far from over, they knew this was a beginning, a chance to build a bridge that would forever change the relationship between their worlds. The days that followed were a quiet revelation. In the stillness of the mountains, Alan Reeves found himself rediscovering the purpose that had once driven him to the edge of obsession. He listened as Liara shared her story, using gestures, visual aids, and the universal language of emotion. She traced the history of Axion's near destruction, the desperation that had led to their cries for help, and the miraculous way Alan's messages had arrived in time to save her people. As Alan studied the child, Solon, he realized they were a living testament to the ripple effects of his work. Solon's glowing, curious eyes watched him with an intensity that was almost otherworldly, as if they could sense the pivotal role he had played in their survival. Liara's presence, and the child's very existence, confirmed something Alan had dared to hope for, but never fully believed. That his actions had mattered, that his cries into the void had been heard. Liara had brought with her more than just gratitude. She carried with her a repository of knowledge, encoded in a crystalline device unlike anything Alan had ever seen. The device contained records of Axion's recovery, scientific advancements inspired by Earth's shared wisdom, and even messages from survivors who wanted to thank the mysterious human who had reached out to them. As Alan pored over the data, he realized just how deeply his work had touched their world. His simple ideas, rooted in Earth's history of survival and resilience, had laid the foundation for Axion's rebirth. Techniques that humans had long taken for granted, crop rotation, water filtration, and radiation shielding, had become lifelines for an entire civilization. The knowledge he had sent had not just saved lives, it had inspired an entire species to rebuild with hope and humility. But Liara had come for more than gratitude. She had questions. What had driven him to help a species he would never meet? Why had he sacrificed his career, reputation, and personal life to chase a signal no one else believed in? Alan reflected on these questions as they walked through the forest one morning. He thought of the countless nights he had spent in the observatory, staring at the stars and feeling an overwhelming sense of connection to something larger than himself. He explained in halting words that he believed in the inherent value of life. Any life. It didn't matter if it was human or alien, near or distant. If he had the power to help, how could he not? Liara nodded, her luminous eyes filled with understanding. She had known hardship and loss, but she had also learned the power of a single act of compassion. In Alan, she saw the embodiment of the values her people had learned to cherish. Before long, word of Liara's presence began to spread. The small town at the base of the mountains buzzed with rumors of an alien visitor and her glowing child. Scientists, journalists, and government officials began to arrive, their curiosity outweighing their fear. But Alan, ever protective of Liara and Solon, acted as a bridge between them and humanity. He shared their story carefully, ensuring it was one of hope and unity, not fear and division. The world listened. For the first time, humanity saw undeniable proof that they were not alone in the universe. Liara's gratitude and the tale of Axion's survival resonated deeply, inspiring people to look beyond their differences and imagine a future where cooperation extended beyond Earth. Alan Reeves, once dismissed as a dreamer, became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when driven by compassion rather than fear. As Liara prepared to leave, she invited Alan to come with her, to see the world he had saved. But Alan chose to stay. His work wasn't finished. He wanted to share his story, to inspire others to listen for whispers in the void and to act with kindness, even when the rewards were unseen. When Liara's ship lifted off, Solon waved through the viewport, their glowing eyes meeting Alan's one last time. He watched until the ship disappeared into the stars, leaving behind a sky filled with infinite possibilities. The cabin in the mountains became a sanctuary, a place where scientists and dreamers gathered to learn from Alan's experience. The crystalline device Liara had left behind became a symbol of interstellar unity, its contents studied and cherished by people from all walks of life. And Alan, once a lonely man shouting into the void, became a legend, a reminder that even the smallest voice can echo across the universe and change the fate of worlds. His legacy was no longer just written in the stars. It was carried in the hearts of two civilizations, forever intertwined by the courage of a single human who chose to listen. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Stories like these remind us of the power of kindness, even when we think no one is watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Starlight Sci-Fi for more cosmic tales that inspire the heart and mind. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars, because the next great story might be waiting out there.